Salam and peace. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Muslim Network TV. Muslim Network TV is always there on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, Apple TV, whole lot of social media, and of course, our own website, which is muslimnetwork.tv. One thing I'm wondering about, what is happening to my birds? About 15, 20 years ago, there will be quite a bit of, orchestra outside my window. And a poet was visiting me, and he's a singer and a composer. He actually composed the whole song because he was sleeping in my living room next to the window. I no longer have that symphony available of natural sounds. What's happening to our environment? What's happening to our world? 25% of Bangladesh right now is underwater. That country might disappear in a short while. There are 100 fires in California, which has destroyed 2,000 structures. Flood in Afghanistan yesterday wiped out a whole town, killing about 100 people, at least 100 people, because most people are buried in the stone houses. Hurricane Laura is devastating the US. Chicago City, for last 15 years, has been planting trees, which are actually native to Alabama, not to Chicago, which freezes so much. Why are they doing that? Are they thinking ahead? Are they making mistake? And when they bring plant life from Alabama to Chicago, is the animal life moving with that? Or animal life will be confused when they don't find the plants they like. What's happening to animal life when all of these things happen? These are the questions. And what's happening to science? I remember 4 years, almost 3.5 years ago, scientists actually marching in Grand Park in Chicago. I went and joined because I never thought about the scientists know how to march. They were marching and speeches were boring because scientists don't know how to deliver speeches to tens of thousands of people. They were sort of lectures, but I hope some of them were enjoying. I understood most of it, but what scientists are doing about that? Are they just worried? Are they thinking of something? Do they have a role in all of that? Can they inform us at least what is happening? To discuss all of that, we had a person who has passion for all of that, and that is Dr. Joseph Gadas. Doctor, welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you for having me, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Gadas is a senior wildlife veterinarian and the science director for the Sea Dog Society, a science-based marine conservation program at the University of California, Davis. He says he has a passion for all things wild, wildlife, wild places, and wild people. Well, I need to find out from him where are the wild people, unless they are found right here on Muslim Network TV today. Well, Dr. Gadas, tell me what is happening to my birds. Where are they?
Yeah, that's a great question. And some science came out a few years ago, Imam, showing that these birds that you love, the birds that I love, the birds that everybody that's a bird watcher loves, the populations have really declined. And it's an example of how we're changing our world. We're using deforesting areas from all the way throughout North and South America where these birds migrate. The climate is changing, things are getting warmer, and so some birds are moving farther north, or in the southern hemisphere farther south. We're using more chemicals with a lot of agriculture. So these pesticides and herbicides are changing the food structure. So what you're experiencing, other people across North America are also experiencing this. It's a change, and it's a wake-up call to all of us that we're doing something, and we have to ask ourselves, is this really how we want to be acting?
So, is this what happened to honeybees? Because people are saying a lot of honeybees have disappeared.
Right. And so honeybees are really important pollinators. There's a whole bunch of crops, that food that you and I love to eat, that depend on having bees to pollinate them. Well, every time that we are spraying for aphids, or we're spraying for ants, or we're spraying for insects, we're also killing those bees. Every time we're putting in non-native flowers that native bees are used to pollinating, they may not know that these new flowers are a source of food for them. And so we're also changing that. So this change of our environment, this climate change, the destruction that we're seeing, it's not just about looking at birds and hearing birds, which is delightful, but some people may think is frivolous. It really comes back to our public health. It comes back to our nutritional health, our food. It's what we call One Health: health of people, health of the environment, health of animals or wildlife are intimately connected.
Hmm. Well, two things in terms of animal and human being which came into focus. Recently, there were some news items that in some small towns, different wild animals are walking in, and birds are enjoying their lunch right in the center of the roads. So, if human beings withdrawing during this pandemic is providing some opportunity, so were we already encroaching in their areas, and which they are finding some relief from that encroachment?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think you nailed it there. As we came into sight of our houses, as we stopped spending time in trails and hiking areas, animals were able to move into those areas because the disturbance of having people there, having dogs there, having our pet cats running free weren't there. And so these animals were had new areas available to them. And I think if you look back, a really profound example of how that works is the whole Chernobyl nuclear disaster. When Chernobyl happened, people left that area. And decades later, scientists went back, they put up trail cameras to look. That used to be a really thriving city where people worked and lived. And what they found is, as the people moved out, these animals, these bears, wolves, other things like that had never been there, moved into that area, even though the nuclear levels were still very high. I kind of joked about it, but I think it might be true. I think that people a lot of times might be worse for wildlife than a nuclear disaster. These animals chose to live in this area when people left, even though it was probably unhealthy in other ways.
Hmm. Wow, you made a profound statement. I think there that human beings may be worse than the nuclear disaster for the wildlife. I mean, I have seen images of Chernobyl. When was it? About 15 years? No, 25 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was over 2 decades ago. And it's just a fascinating article just came out a few years ago where they were showing this. Now, to be fair to everybody, there are a lot of people out there who are planting native trees, planting native flowers, restoring habitat. That's the sort of thing that we need to do if we want to live in harmony with our environment, if we want to have these things around us, if we want to have wildlife be healthy, if we want to have it support us, provide us with food, provide us with pollinators. That's kind of the attitude that we have to have. We have to say, we can do better.
Well, but engineering sometimes has some human engineering. I mean, human interference has a problem, but human engineering may also introduce some issues. For example, in Chicago area, but thinking of future issues with the climate change, they're planting trees which are from Alabama, which is a somewhat of a different ecosystem as compared to Chicago, which get frozen. Our lake becomes like a road
Right,
in
right.
winters and all that. So they're forcing the change. They're bringing the trees. Do you think this is a wise thing to think of future in that way, or that is also an engineering which may backfire? What will happen to? I mean, those trees probably were connected with the ecosystem. So we are not bringing the ecosystem. We're just planting some trees.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it depends on how they decided to put those trees in there. If they did some science and they said, look, it's going to be warmer here by several degrees Celsius, and we think that the trees that we have now are not going to survive, so we should plan forward and start to plant trees that are going to be able to survive. I think that's a good idea. Now, what you don't want to do is bring up new agricultural pests with those trees. You don't want to bring up new parasites, things like that. So it just kind of matters why they were doing it. If they just did it because they thought they have pretty flowers, probably not the right idea. But if it was a thoughtful, science-based decision, then maybe what they're doing is called mitigating. Maybe they're planning ahead for a changing climate.
Yeah, I think that those were the motives. They are also using on sidewalk the material which was not used in Chicago, but it is used in Alabama. So those things can last when tree grow up.
Right.
And when the sidewalks, I mean, they're all planning that, warmer climate change going to happen here. I hope I don't have to change my gardening practice on what I grow and when I grow, but it seems I will have to. I will have to probably learn. Do gardeners need to be thinking about, what type of changes they need to have?
I think so. I mean, I think what you're seeing is that the change is real. A lot of times people say, "Oh, climate change, it's just a theory," but temperatures are already changing. Animals are already moving. The pH of the ocean is already changing because of the CO2. And so as gardeners, I'm a gardener too, we probably are going to have to start planting a little bit earlier. We probably can consider growing some crops. I live in Washington State on a small island. It's hard for us to grow peppers and tomatoes, but I think in future years we're probably going to be able to plant more of them. So I think we have to start thinking like that.
Okay. So, talking about the pandemic, I mean, one of the things is that some politicians are blaming certain animals. What animals are thinking about, we blaming them for the pandemic.
Right. We have strong and growing evidence that this coronavirus, this SARS-CoV-2, as the scientists call the actual virus itself, probably came from bats. And so a lot of people are saying, well, maybe we should just kill all the bats. That's really the wrong approach to take. What we really need to be thinking about is saying, why were people exposed to a virus that's probably lived in this bat species for thousands of years? Why were we just exposed now? Well, we were exposed because we're increasing deforestation. We're going out, we're capturing those bats, we're selling them in markets, we're eating them where people had not been eating them. We're changing the environment, we're changing the ecosystem, and that exposes us to new threats. And so I think, my dad always said, when you point a finger, you remember that you have three fingers pointing back right at you. And so, we're pointing a finger at the bats, but I think when we look at the whole situation, we've actually changed the environment. We've increased our exposure to those bats and hence increased our exposure to that virus. And that's the reminder that climate change and what's happening to our environment is not just important. We love to see birds. You and I are bird watchers. We like to grow vegetables and things like that. But it also was about our personal health. Things will change, and we need to take care of the environment because it takes care of us.
Well, during the pandemic, I mean, people have, first run was on toilet papers. And then people started gathering groceries much more than they need. And the whole food chain came into discussion for the first time, I think, after a long period of time, that wherever food is coming from. And I was short of some seeds. And when I tried to order, I realized that most of the people selling seeds are out of them because suddenly there is a run on that. And many things connected with gardening were out of stock and things like that. And the other day when I got up, after 45 years, I heard a rooster in my neighborhood. So people, do you think people and scientists and regular consumers are bringing this thought of our connection with food chain, animal life, domesticated animal which we eat, and all that. Is there some higher level of awareness and connectedness with the other realm, human realm, to trees and birds and other animal lives? Are there that consciousness improving somehow?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right there. That this pandemic has been a disaster worldwide, and it's just had so many bad things. But this might be a little silver lining, that people have to now start thinking about food security and food supply chains. And if you go to the grocery store and you can't buy fresh fruits and vegetables, and you depend on that, for your healthy diet, people started thinking like, maybe I could have a small garden. Maybe I could grow some lettuce. Maybe I could have some chickens and a rooster and have some fresh eggs, and I can get that without even going to the store. And I think, as you said, getting people back in touch with where their food supply comes from is really important, because your eggs don't come from a carton. They come from a chicken, and they, to fertilize that, to have more chickens, you need a rooster. People a lot of times are out of touch with that because of the way our systems work. So I think it's not great when you can't get the seeds that you want, but I do think that it's great that people are starting to get back in touch with where their food comes from and understanding those processes. It's only going to make us take better care of the world around us, which we depend on.
Well, thank you so much. We'll continue this conversation. And this is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with Professor Joe Gedos about the impact of climate change on animal life and other realm, other being, trees, animals. They're all living structures, just like human beings. Sometimes we are so selfish, focus on ourselves and our moving forward, and more, and we become more, we want to consume more, and because we want to consume more, but don't want to spend a whole lot of money. So people produce around the world, burning all the fossil fuel in the world to feed our hunger for more and more. What about sharing more and consuming less? So we will continue this conversation. You're watching Muslim Network TV. On Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, and Muslim Network .com .tv, Muslim Network .tv. We'll be right back after these messages.
My wife, she's a professor at the University of Cincinnati, who's Catholic, and by her watching and listening to our 3-year-old son watch Adam's World, she ended up taking Kalima Shahada. She embraced Islam because she learned so much about Islam and the other prophets. It really affected our life in a great way, and because of Sound Vision and Adam's World, we're Muslims.
I took my Shahada 15 years ago, and I actually am from a rural part of Ohio. And so I found the catalog for Sound Vision, and I ordered the tapes and the CDs and the books, and I used those, and especially for my little daughter, that's how we basically learned our Islam, and Islam entered our hearts through the wonderful works of Sound Vision.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, brother. I just want you to know that I love the Sound Vision website, that a lot of times when I'm looking for information, especially as it relates to homelessness, domestic violence, and women issues, I go to that website, and then I see what you've written, and then I copy and paste it and spread the word, because the wisdom is there. So I can't do any better than what Sound Vision has already done.
Sound Vision is our survival guide. It is the organization that provides skills for Muslims how to survive and thrive in this community here in the U.S.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Anam, I'm in 11th grade, and I grew up with Adam's World, and what it taught me was unity, respect, and love for the Muslim Ummah.
Adam's World is the greatest show ever made. Take me to the Kaaba, man. I love that puppet.
Assalamu alaikum. Open up your eyes.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever-popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah, let's explore.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. I'm talking with Dr. Joe Geddos. Some people still say that, well, disaster always, weather-related disasters always happen, and there is a higher level of anxiety about that because there is a higher level of news because of the news media. Blame news media. I don't know who defend news media. Blame media that they are bringing the news of disaster every day, and there may not be much change. Just last week, we got this 2 cyclones attacking in the south and California burning. Bangladesh is 25% of Bangladesh is underwater. So what do you think? Really, climate changes are increasing the rate of disaster, or is the news cycle which is bringing disaster more to us?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'm not a climatologist, and I live in the Pacific Northwest. I live in Washington State. And I can tell you that we have very good science right now showing that what's happening with climate change and what we can expect to have in this area where I live is that we're going to have more rainstorms. We're going to have less snowstorms. We're going to have less snowpack. We're going to have more flooding. We're going to have temperature changes. And so I think in a lot of regions around the world where scientists are studying that, we're actually seeing that weather patterns are changing. Now, I think it's very hard to say this storm was related to climate change or that storm was related to climate change. But I think overall, something like the fires in California right now, we are experiencing a drier world. We're experiencing a hotter world. And with that comes things like more fires. So I think that there are a lot of things that are related to climate change. My understanding is it's difficult to say this fire is because of climate change. But I think we have to start realizing things are changing. It's happening right now. And what we need to do, we need to still try and solve the problem, but we also need to be trying to mitigate for it too.
So the heat, which you're saying, when heat alters ice, you're saying there's going to be less snowstorm and weather and oceans. What happened to animals in there? You are into research in oceans and animal life there. What happens to what's happening to fish?
Yeah, it's a good question because I live in a place called the Sailor Sea. It's about a 17,000 square kilometer inland sea that's shared with Washington and British Columbia. It's a beautiful place. We have 5 species of Pacific salmon. We have 3 different types of killer whales. It's an amazing place. The salmon, now imagine this, salmon are born in a stream and then they go out to the ocean and then 2 or maybe 4, maybe even 7 years, they come back. And so if we're having more flooding, those salmon eggs that are in the stream are more likely to get washed out. If it's getting more flooding in the, say, spring or winter, if it's drier in the summer, which was what we see, then those salmon have more trouble as adults coming back up. Now, we have over 130 species of vertebrates that eat salmon, people included. So all of those species are going to be affected. And there was a nice science paper that came out recently looking at the indigenous people of this area, the Coast Salish, the First Nations, and the tribal people who very much depend on salmon for a way of life. And they're showing that in British Columbia, just north of where I am in the same ecosystem, farther south, those people are going to be catching less fish than they are farther north in British Columbia because the ocean temperature is changing and because of the climate change and the way it's affecting salmon. And so it's affecting animals like killer whales, but it's also affecting people because we eat the same food that they do, salmon. And so it's a whole, everything is interconnected. And I think that you begin to see that when you tug on one thread, everything starts to unravel.
You know, you use the word interconnectedness of humanity with animal life and plant life. Do you think, I see children and my grandchildren, they are very strict in terms of recycling and all that. I think it is coming from their schoolings, and of course, parenting is part of teaching children. But do you think that interconnectedness of human life, animal life, and plant life is properly taught at this moment in our school system and the way we know about things?
I think that we're getting better at it, but I think there's always room for improvement. I think there are a lot of things in our schooling that we're doing better at. And so if we can, children, your grandchildren, my children, they're interested, they want to learn everything. And so if we tell them the truth, right, those eggs come from the chicken next door, they don't come from the grocery store, then they begin to get connected to that, or they see the way that soil produces food. They see the way that trees bring in birds. Those things are really important. And I think that we're getting there with educating them, but we could definitely be doing a better job with that. We actually were thinking about that exact thing a few years ago. We wrote a book on the Salish Sea, and a few years later, we ended up writing a children's book, a book for fifth graders specifically. In fifth grade, that's when students are learning about the environment, about ecosystems, about trophic levels. And we said, why don't we give them a book that they can read with their parents or with their teacher that gives examples of all of those things that are right here where they live. And it's fascinating to watch children see those examples, learn about those examples, and learn about how they are connected and how they actually have a responsibility. And they remind us how we have a responsibility to do a better job of taking care of this place.
Well, when early level of presidential campaign and debate, I came to know the Washington governor Inslee, and I like his focus on climate change. And when he said, especially when people are talking about it, I'm doing these things in Washington state. And I started regularly. I put him on my monthly donation list, which I was giving. Is he really bringing policies in Washington which are science-based and having an impact over there? Or he's one of those politicians who has good talking points?
No, I'm very impressed with Governor Inslee, and I've enjoyed working with him immensely. He puts his money where his mouth is. His actions are following his words. For example, let's talk about ocean acidification. So, what does that really mean? As we've been pumping a lot of human-made carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, the ocean has been sucking it up. And we thought, the ocean will just buffer all of that. But what we've realized is that the ocean can't buffer that. So the pH, the acidity of the ocean, is slowly becoming more acidic. And that's called ocean acidification. That's very important because there's a lot of organisms that make shells. And as the pH changes, they can't make a shell. Imagine a crab not being able to make a shell. It's not going to survive. Imagine an oyster not being able to make a shell. Imagine all the animals that eat that. So Governor Inslee, not so long ago, was very forward thinking, and he said, wow, we need to make a blue ribbon panel on ocean acidification to understand what we can do, to look at the science of it, and to understand how we can do better and how we can prepare for this. This is just one aspect of climate change. And so he put together the first blue ribbon panel on ocean acidification for a state, for Washington State, and got us on the road to trying to understand it, trying to change it, and trying to mitigate where we couldn't change it. And many other states have followed in that. And that's just one example of his actions towards dealing with climate change.
How much it is possible, say, if Washington State, on the other side, British Columbia, and your neighboring states, if a regional decisions are made like that, can there be a regional ecosystem which is performing better and doing better for the interconnected life, while it is still part of the overall global situation? What I'm trying to get at is that there is a huge emphasis on the governments doing the right thing. But government is a whole lot of politics there. So is there a possibility, or more than a possibility, a possible impact of a regional ecosystem becoming better and serving the right cause? Is this possible?
Oh, it's beyond possible. It's even been well studied that we can work at the ecosystem. The whole world is connected. The pandemic has shown us that. But that doesn't mean that we can't make improvements at the local level. Let's go back to your bird example. You may have less birds, but by taking care of your garden, by planting native trees and native plants, you're probably going to have more birds than, say, your neighbor down the street, maybe that clear cut their lot. The same thing can happen. I work in the Salish Sea. This is a well-defined ecosystem. We can do a lot of things to improve this place. We can restore salmon rivers. We can take down dams. We can protect shorelines. We can regulate harvest to make sure there's plenty more. We may still have increased CO2 coming from around the world, but all of those things that we do are going to make it better here. And people talk about that. They say, think globally, but act locally. And it really does matter what you do locally. And I think that that's very empowering to us as individuals to think about, what can I do? I can do something and I can make a difference. Let me ask myself what I can do. And start with that first and then move outwards from there.
You're watching Muslim Network TV, and this is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with Dr. Joe Gatos about impact of climate change on other form of life, animal life, plant life, and our interconnectedness. We'll be right back to continue our conversation further.
What was it like when you started this network out, when you started Sound Vision those many years ago?
After 9/11, one lady called me and she says, what is your channel which I can watch? And I say, I'm sorry, we don't have a channel. And you know what she said? She said, then how America will know about you?
SubhanAllah. Anything you want to say to the people who are watching? We had one sister who messaged that she grew up on Sound Vision. What do you say to the people who have been long supporters?
Thank you. Thank you. It is because of you we are able to do all of that. So the generation of Adam's World, you need to take it over for the next generation. And that's my invitation to you. So keep telling everybody where to watch. They can watch it on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, or easy thing, muslimnetwork.tv, or our YouTube channel, or our Facebook channel. And with your help, inshallah, ladies, the one who called me, what channel should I watch Muslims on? Answer is here and now.
up your eyes.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppet stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
It's Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah, let's explore.
Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. You're watching us on muslimnetwork.tv, Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, and a whole lot of other places. Dr. Gedas, what does your CDOC society does?
Yeah, well, that's a great, people ask that. What is the CDOC Society? And think of it kind of as sea doctors. We're basically interested in having a healthy ocean. And we're a group of scientists, veterinarians, and then a group of citizens that are interested in using science to make better decisions. So we fund and conduct science, we publish papers, but then we take that a step further. We really work and try and make sure that the science gets into policy and management, helps us make better decisions at the, at the policy level, the management level, but then sometimes even at the personal level as well. So I would say we're a conservation group that uses science to make the oceans healthier.
Okay, so you actually are a policy recommendation group, or you're more of a research group?
Well, we're a little bit of both. We do research, but we also spend a lot of time talking to people that are making policy or making management decisions, and they have questions for us. So I'll give you an example. Maybe we studied a bird that is in decline. We have these beautiful sea ducks called scoters that have declined about 50% over the last 25 years, which is dramatic. And these are beautiful birds. And so we've been studying, why did they decline? Well, one thing we noticed is that people are still hunting them and eating them. We don't think that's why they declined, but we did a study to see if the hunting of those animals could actually be contributing to the decline. We don't think it was the reason, but we think it could be making things worse. What some people call just another nail in the coffin. And so we funded a study. We found some scientists to do this work. The results came back. And then we took it to the next level. We talked to Audubon groups. We talked to the Fish and Wildlife Commission. We talked to the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And a few years later, they realized that, hey, we really are probably hunting too much. So we need to cut the hunting down to protect these species while we work on recovering them. So that's an example of doing the science, but also connecting it to the policy and to the management.
Talking about policy, I remember immediately after President Trump took office, a person applied for a job in the not-for-profit which I lead, and he was furloughed from the EPA. And he said he was at the leading position. He used to go presentations and things like that. He said, I have been ordered not to make a single presentation. I have been ordered this, I have been ordered that. And he also told me that, lot of our research and papers and things like that are at the risk of being destroyed, and we're trying to preserve them somehow. Then I saw some news which was correlating to what this person. I mean, we did retain him for a few months before he was called back. But the news about EPA and its policies and all that sort of disappeared. So what is the current status of EPA? Were they still worried about all the science being erased from the historic documentation and record, or it has been preserved? Is there some balance has been achieved? Because at one time it was going a completely opposite the science. Is there somewhat of a balance have been achieved?
Yeah, it's a good question. And definitely when this current administration came into power, they did what they could to try and make the EPA less important and have them make less of a statement. We work with EPA Region 10, and the scientists there, they're phenomenal scientists. They're great people to work with. But when your manager from above, your boss, is saying, hey, you can't talk about this, or you can't do this, that's not what the EPA was designed for. I'll tell you an interesting story. Not long after the new administration came in, I was in Seattle and I had a meeting with Bill Ruckelshaus, who was appointed by Nixon to actually head the EPA when it first started. And I went in to meet with him, and I was waiting, which was unusual. He's a very timely person. He's since passed. We came into the room and sat down, and he was visibly flustered. And I've never seen Bill flustered like that before. And he said, I'm sorry, I've been trying to get the president on the phone and he won't take my call. And I thought, wow. And I kind of joked with him. I said, yeah, he's not taking my calls either right now. But he said to me at that point, he said, the EPA was created to protect everybody's health, the environment. So air quality is for everybody, not just for Republicans or for Democrats. Water quality is for everybody, not just for Republicans or for Democrats. It should not be a political part of our government. It is about protecting the people, and that's how it was designed. And that came from the man who headed the EPA when it started. And it made me sad that we had taken that turn in this country, and it made me think that that's really not what we should be doing. We should be using science to protect and to help everybody.
So has some sanity, after all these 2-3 years, has some sanity returned to EPA?
My impression from working with the Region 10 people is that they are still doing good work. I'm not sure how much they've been unable to do presentations or to talk about things, but they're still in the game. They've still been good collaborators with the CDOC Society and other people, and working with the US and with Canada and with the tribes. So I'm hoping that's been some improvement.
You mentioned Canada. There's a whole lot there. I mean, all the glaciers which are melting, and permafrost issues, and what's going to happen to polar bear. And so is Canada in some way better in terms of taking care of this whole ecosystem which is interconnected?
I think it's a lot like the US. It can change with politics. And so, a few years ago, Canada had a prime minister that was very much pro-extraction and was not interested in addressing climate change. I think that the current Trudeau administration is very interested. They've even changed the name of one of their federal agencies to include climate change in there so they can deal with that. And so I think that it has to do with whoever was making the rules at the top. And I would say the current administration is paying attention to that right now.
What is it which people can do to liberate this issue from becoming a partisan issue? I mean, it's, as you mentioned, the water and the air.
Yeah.
Whether you're in politics or not, whatever party it is, you have to deal with this. This is such a critical issue. What can be done to liberate it from it being a partisan issue?
Yeah, it's a really important question that you're asking. And I'm not sure I have the answer, but I think if we can message correctly to say this is about the health of everybody, doesn't matter whether you're low income or high income, or you're red state or you're blue state, or you're Republican or Democrat, black or white or whatever, this is about everybody. And so we all need to pay attention to that. It's a unifying thing. We all breathe this air together. We all drink that same water out of the tap. Sometimes people that have more money may be able to go buy bottled water, but I think that we need to see public health as something that's for everybody. It's not a political issue, and we need to message that.
Well, since Al Gore became its champion and he was a Democrat, I think it might have something to do with that. So what about using the same technique and getting President Bush to champion from the conservative side? Because I heard that his house is built in consideration of climate change and passive solar technology and active solar technology. And he's also found chopping wood in around his ranch and painting. So recruiting another champion from the other side may bring in. I once actually I was speaking with Vice President Al Gore in some conference, I think when climate change marches were happening in New York. So actually I shared this idea with him. Why not you go and meet with him? He was your great rival. And he was somewhat skeptic of the idea. But don't you think that might help bring it to liberate it from that partisan box?
I think it's a great idea, Imam Mujahid. I think that, having people be able to see that it doesn't matter which side of the aisle that you're sitting on, it doesn't matter what color, what race, what religion, having people come together and state that, I think is the way to diffuse the political nature of it. I like the idea.
What about you recruiting your governor to seek an appointment with President Bush?
I think that's a smart idea. Next time I speak with him or one of his environmental advisors, I'll bring up the idea.
Yeah, I think when I was chair of the Parliament of the World Religions, I made sure that I get a lot of conservative people to speak on the climate change. And some of them were more than happy to come forward. And liberals were all surprised that there are conservative who, politically conservative that is, or socially conservative, who support the science on the climate change. I think this political balance is needed. Otherwise, if people keep treating like that, it will just cloud understanding and and just blame game, and the politics could be the way it is. So maybe some political leader like your governor might be able to play a role in there. But in the meantime, I mean, expecting government to do major things is the right thing to do because they have the money, they make policies. And people can have an impact on their government during election and after elections. But what is it which people can do to raise families and live in a way that in our small way brings the reality of interconnectedness to our home and our lifestyle?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question because we don't want to just pass it on to the federal government, to the state government. And we don't want to pass it on to the next generation. We don't want to say, thank goodness Greta Thunberg's here because we've messed it up so we can give up. We need to educate our children. We need to tell them about the connections that we have with the environment. Where does our air come from? Half of the oxygen that we breathe is produced by photosynthetic plankton in the ocean. Where does our climate come from? Where does our water cycle come from? And, have our children understand that, and so that they can see that they need to protect and take care of that. The other thing that we can do is we don't have to just do that for our children and sit back and wait for them to make change. We can be looking at our own lifestyles. When can we walk somewhere and not drive the car? When can we take the bus? When can we ride a bike? When can we plant a native tree? When can we plant native things in our gardens that are good for honeybees? When do we not use a pesticide or an herbicide where does our food come from? Do we want to have gardens in our yard like you do? I mean, these are all personal changes, but when you magnify them over the billions of people on Earth, it makes a big difference.
I was watching, you must have seen that film also, in which, oceans are rising and taking over New York and things of this nature. So are ocean really expanding?
Yeah, so what's happening is that as the climate warms, that a lot of the ice that is sequestered water in the two poles of the Earth is melting. And so, excuse me, we're seeing that ocean level is rising, some places faster than other places. And it's not like it's just going to come up and then all of a sudden we're going to be below it. But what happens is as the level rises, storm surges start to get higher and higher and higher and make different problems. So it comes kind of punctuated when this elevation changes. So places like Florida are places like New York City, they're at high risk, and scientists are able to look at these areas, and governments that are very proactive are starting to say, it might be cheaper to do something now than to wait for the next storm disaster and the water level to change. Things are really happening, and the people that are forward thinking are the ones that are going to save money and probably save lives as well.
You mentioned that half of our oxygen is produced by oceans. How do scientists measure ocean temperature and how it impacts climate change?
So great question, because the ocean covers 70% of the surface of the Earth. That's a lot to monitor. But what people have been doing is that whether it's off of docks, maybe at university marine stations, or buoys that are out in the water, but the United States has a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that has a very good, very powerful monitoring network. It helps us with our weather, but it also monitors things like ocean temperature. And so when we want to compare maybe a problem, we had a disease outbreak in starfish a few years back, and it just decimated some species of starfish. And so we wanted to look what was the relationship with ocean temperature. We could actually go back to all of those data and talk with the NOAA scientists and then line up the outbreak with the ocean temperature. And we could see, wow, outbreaks occurred more dramatically and faster where the ocean temperature was rising. So there's a really great network of monitoring that scientists can go to and to look at and to make comparisons.
So, so you also study, the sea life diversity. How sea life diversity is changing and why it is important for the whole species?
Yeah, it's a great question. Go back to thinking of the ocean as covering 70% of the Earth. A lot of the food that we depend on comes from the ocean. A lot of fish, a lot of shellfish, things like that. And so what we're seeing now is that a lot of those species are in decline. And these are species that are commercially important or have been commercially important. We're just not catching them anymore. So things that you may have seen on the restaurant menu 10 years ago are not on the menu anymore because it's not economically feasible to catch them. So as the ocean temperatures warm, as fish species move, we're seeing a decline. People are having more and more trouble catching fish. So we're seeing fish population after fish population start to drop off. And that's, people need protein as part of their diet. And fish is one way that a lot of people in the world feed themselves. And so, that's just one example of how the ocean is changing and how it's affecting us as people that depend on that ocean.
So one of the question which I have received is that how global plan of action, how is it doing in having an impact on it? I mean, there were a lot of talk and climate, Paris Accord and all that. So where are the impact of that on climate change?
It's a very good question because we do have to think globally. And I want to applaud the United Nations because part of their UN Sustainable Development Goals actually addresses oceans, addresses wildlife, and addresses climate change. And so some countries obviously are doing better than other countries, but the UN is trying to get everybody to realize that it's all in our best interest to really address this, to really plan for it, and to really mitigate for it. And so, like I said, there are some countries that are doing better than others. And I think we probably all have the ability to improve on what we're doing now. But we need to call for that. We need to say this is important for us. This is important for our future, for our children.
So there was a whole lot of emphasis upon certain percentage reduction in CO2 which we achieved in a certain time period. How are we in terms of measurement?
Yeah, I don't think we're doing well. We've set those bars kind of as a line in the sand. We don't want to cross that, and then we keep inching up, and then going over. And I think what happens a lot of times is the public goes, "Oh, cat's out of the bag. We can't do anything." But that's not really the case. Even though that we're not necessarily meeting those carbon emission goals, what we're seeing is that some places, and like maybe in Europe, where they're actually taxing carbon, they're able to do better. And so, we can look to places that are doing better and then make that example at home as well. And so, our grade is not very good right now, but that doesn't mean we can't study harder and make a better grade.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Joe Gados. This has been a very good, enlightening conversation. And now I have this desire to visit your island one of these days.
You are more than welcome. And I'd love to send you a copy of our books, the adult book and the kids book on the Sailor Sea. I think you'll enjoy it and you'll want to come visit even more. And I'd love to have
it. Another chance to review that book on Muslim Network TV and talk about it. Actually, maybe you want to be a guest. I mean, we have, because of the pandemic, there's the online programming which we do for children. There are performers. So if you give us permission for children book, maybe one of the performers can actually do a whole 30-minute class based on that as well.
That would be great. I would love that.
Well, and keep your assignment. You need to talk to your governor now. We need to recruit a conservative to lead that. Thank you so much, Dr. J.
Thank you, Mujahid.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Abdul Wahid, for producing today's show, assisted by Sherdil Khan. Thank you, Sherdil. You have been watching Muslim Network TV. This is where interesting conversations take place on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and our website, muslimnetwork.tv. Peace. Salam.
Salam.